Musicality is one of those qualities that teachers ask for constantly, and yet almost never explain. Be more musical, feel the music, let it move through you. But what does that actually mean? And how do you get there? This episode is part of our ongoing series with Chelsea Weidman, also known as the Geeky Ballerina, where we unpack specific elements of artistry as she identified and explored them in her thesis on artistry in ballet. Today, we're diving into one of the most personal and most debated elements of all musicality. Chelsea walks us through her framework of 9 distinct elements of musicality, from rhythm and dynamics to phrasing and accent, and she explains how understanding these elements can inform and inspire your dancing. We also talk about why so many dancers can hear the music but struggle to translate it into their body, and what it really looks like when a dancer is being truly musical, beyond just staying on the beat. If you've ever been told to be more musical but had no idea where to start, this episode will give you a framework, a language, and some practical tools to get there. Let's get into it. Hello, Chelsea. Thank you so much for being back for this next element in our series.
I'm so happy. This is so much fun.
Yes, I was trying to remember beforehand. I'm like, one day I'll actually figure this out before we start recording, but I think this is element 4.
I think it's the fourth.
I think it's 4. Yeah. So today we're going to talk all about musicality, which I think this one, I say this about everyone because they're all so good, but musicality, I think similar to artistry, is one of those words that gets thrown out a lot without a lot of detail, definition, context behind it. And so I'm excited to really get into the nitty-gritty of this element of artistry because I think for myself and everyone listening, it's going to give a lot of clarity for things that we can actually start working on applying in class. So I would love if we could just dive into what is musicality, what makes up musicality in a way that gives adults something they can really like sink their teeth into when they're hearing that word in class versus just this term that's getting thrown out of like, use more musicality.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I love this. Musicality is actually really simple. It is just the way that your dancing relates or does not relate intentionally to the music.
Mm.
That's all it is. And it can be done really any way. There's no such thing as wrong, although because ballet is a Western European art form and Western European music, like they grew up together, there are some really strong associations. But let's talk specifically because I have to get my own book out here because I can't remember all these things. I did break musicality specifically into 9 elements of its own. So artistry is 9 elements, and then musicality is like 9 more. So now we're looking at 18 elements. So, that's a lot. We got a lot going on here. But the most foundational part of musicality is the rhythm, which a lot of people confuse with meter, and we will get into that, but meter is, I think, the 4th. So rhythm is just a repeating pattern of sound and silence. That's it.
Yeah.
And the proportion of the sound to silence does not change no matter how fast or slow it gets. The rhythm doesn't change. The speed can. So that's the first one that we work on. The next one is tempo, which is speed. How fast, how slow. The next one is dynamics. Dynamics is like the force behind it. So like loud or soft is the easiest way to talk about it. And I think the reason they are so linked just naturally for most people is because the louder the sound is, the more physical effort it took the musician to make it. Like if you have a loud trumpet sound, it took a lot of breath. Or if you have a loud piano piece, we are like banging on the keys. And I think just as humans, we naturally associate those heavy, forceful, strong, like decisive movements with strong dynamics. So now the 4th one is meter. I was correct. Meter is not critical to dancing. You don't have to know what meter is. It's also called the time signature, but meter is the tool that composers use to record time on the sheet music.
Yeah.
So if you have no intention of ever reading sheet music in your life, you could skip this one. Functionally, for dancers, people are going to talk about a double meter or a duple meter. They are the same thing. Or a triple meter. And that just means is it an even number of counts, like with the heavy and then the lighter counts, or is it an odd number? If it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, 4, that's a duple meter. And then a triple meter, those are your waltzes, polonaise. Those they're 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3. They also could be done in sixes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, where the 1 is always the heaviest and the 4 is the second heaviest, and then all of the others are lighter. But if you can't tell the difference between a 6/8 and a 3/4, you're fine. You're totally fine as a dancer.
Yeah, I think the biggest one that shows up within ballet is, like you said, maybe the waltz is gonna be a little bit different because if you're used to counting on an 8 count, you'll be like, "What?"
Yeah, you're like, there was no 8 right there.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah,
Yeah.
it layers. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And this is where writing it out on either the mirror or a whiteboard. I carry dry erase markers in my teaching bag because I will write it out, like showing people. And especially if you can draw it to look like a ruler, because we're used to like 1 inch, inch and a half. And then you've got like inch and a quarter is a little bit smaller.
Yeah.
That's what it is. That's what meter is. It's
Mhm.
measuring time. The next one is, okay, I'm going to say this wrong. It's going to hurt people's ears, but I just call it timbre. I'm just really leaning into the US, I don't have to say anything correctly thing. It's probably like timbre or something like that.
Yeah.
Apologies to everybody whose ears are bleeding. But what it is this idea that different instruments sound recognizably different from others, even if they're playing the same note.
Yeah.
Kind of like every person's voice has its own timbre. People can tell if I'm talking versus you're talking. People can tell, is it a stringed instrument or a brass instrument? People who are really familiar with instruments can tell the difference between like a flute and a piccolo. So that's what that is. And that's an element of musicality, particularly for if you're getting ready to perform. Because when we're in class, it's usually piano accompaniment,
Mhm.
which is just one instrument. But when we get to perform, we often get to use orchestrated scores. And then you can be like, okay, it becomes so much more than the counts. So much, you're like, I want to really align with the violin here or something else.
Yeah.
So now I'm getting into accents. That's the next one. I've definitely lost count. We're fine.
6. We're on 6.
Your accents are where you spend the most time. So if you're doing, for example, a tendu and you're out on count 1 and you're in on count 2, that is unaccented. But if you're out on the 1 and you're in on and then out again on 2, your accent is out. The 7th thing that I get into when I teach is melody. Everybody knows what melody is. Most people are not used to talking about it. So I could be like, what is the melody to, I don't know. What's one of your favorite songs right now?
Oh gosh. I'm just gonna this is not one of my favorite songs, but the song coming to mind is like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the one that was coming to my mind too. Yeah. But when we talk about melody, it's things like, is it a narrow range of notes for Twinkle Twinkle Little Star? It is, which is why you can play it on like the 6-note keyboard that 2-year-olds have. Or is it like a broad range of notes? Or do we change from one note to the next in really small steps or in really big steps? Do we change from one note to the other really smoothly? Things like that. Those are ways to talk about melody. And melody is really fun in musicality because a lot of people naturally, when they think about linking up their music and their movement, they will naturally choose the melody.
Yeah.
And that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. It makes for some really, really beautiful pieces.
Mhm.
But when we're aware of what we're doing, we have more options because we could choose to try something else the next time.
Yeah.
So in current music, the stuff that we all are listening to on whatever, the melody is almost always in the higher notes and the rhythm and the downbeat is almost always in the lower notes. And that's where people are used to looking for those two separate elements.
Yeah.
But if you go back in time, Bach in particular is the one that's coming to mind. So whatever, Google that era. I don't have that information in my head. The melody is still the high notes, but that's also where your your downbeat is kept, which is why sometimes people will say ballet music has no beat, it has no rhythm, you can't count it. You totally can, it totally does. It's just not where you're expecting it to be, which then opens you up to all kinds of interesting conversations about all the other musical traditions in the world. Where is that melody typically found? Where is that downbeat typically found? It just helps to wrinkle your brain a little bit so that you realize, like, the way we do things in ballet is just one way to do it.
Yeah.
So that's melody, and then melody ties directly into harmony. Harmony is just anytime there are two different notes played at the same time, how they relate to each other. So it can get confused with timbre because they'll be like, well, I heard two instruments, and you're like, it's the same note though.
Yeah.
But if it's two different notes, then we're talking about harmony. And I can only speak to harmonics in Western music. That's the only area I have any level of familiarity with. But we do need to point out that every musical tradition has its own conventions around harmony. So in Western music, Western classical music in particular, the concept of harmony was based on Pythagoras's like math. He did the math. And so we are used to very clear either dissonance, which doesn't sound good, and then there's resonance, which to our ears sounds good because it is familiar.
Yeah.
I get a little bit antsy when students are like, oh, that's bad. I'm like, no, it's not bad. It's just different.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take a little detour here because there are other elements of musicality that we've talked about that also are really culturally conditioned. So if you talk about the concept of major and minor keys, for people who are comfortable and familiar and used to Western music, we usually associate minor keys with sadness and major keys with happiness.
Mm-hmm.
This is not true globally.
Yeah.
There are other cultures that will have a completely separate association. There are other cultures where like major and minor don't play into it. That's a specific thing. Another association that we tend to make in Western music is tempo. We tend to associate slow songs with sad and fast songs with happy. That's just something we're used to. There's nothing inherent about the music that would make us feel happy if we hadn't already made the association.
Yeah, especially in the absence of lyrics, when there's not there's not words that are giving you concrete ideas to form emotions off of. It's like, it's just so interesting. I was it was called cross-cultural sociology at my college because we didn't have a full anthropology department, but it was essentially an anthropology major. And that was my major in college. And so, it's all about culture. And so this to me, it was like such an interesting concept in reading this chapter of your book and going through this element, because I was like, oh yes, this makes complete sense to me as someone who studied anthropology, because almost everything is culturally defined and conditioned, and so, but there's just so much that we accept as being universal that is not. So it's interesting, like music is exactly the same.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Thank you to Orza for sponsoring today's episode. Ballet asks a lot of our bodies, and our feet are often the first place we feel it. Especially as adult dancers, balancing our training with busy lives, old injuries, long days, and limited recovery time, taking care of ourselves really matters. And that's why I love Orza ballet slippers. Orza was created by professional dancer Seth Orza, who experienced firsthand the need for better, smarter slippers. After developing severe plantar fasciitis, he created the first ever patented shock-absorbing ballet shoes designed to support your body with modern footwear technology while still maintaining the traditional ballet aesthetic. Because they're designed to help reduce fatigue, improve stamina, and prevent injuries, you can focus more on your dancing and less on pain management. I started wearing the Orza Pro 2.0 earlier this year and have never looked back. The shock absorption has virtually eliminated chronic pain in my right foot, and they've made such a difference in how I feel both during and after class. If you're an adult dancer like me, you know how important it is to take care of your body so you can keep doing what you love. Visit orzabrand.com and use code AFTERCLASS5 for $5 off your new favorite ballet slippers. Links included in the show notes.
The next thing that I break musicality down into is phrasing. If you're not a music major, you don't need to know very much about, but it's kind of like how in English we have natural phrases and we put lots of phrases together to create meaning in a larger piece. It's kind of what the music does. In Western music, it's very often like counts of 8, but not always. But phrasing comes in, especially if you are struggling to link movements together, right? So we have these vocabulary steps. Those are like the words. And we are thinking like tombe, pas de bourrée, glissade, pas de chat, like that. Ugh.
Yeah.
And so if you start thinking of it as tombe, pas de bourrée, glissade, pas de chat, it will flow together better. It's a tricky transition to make.
It's definitely challenging. Like I find that a lot when I watch videos of myself dancing is the choppiness, between steps and trying to work through how do you smooth that out more. And so I think even just in understanding this element of phrasing within musicality is like it's almost giving more concrete definition to why we want to be working on that, because it not looking choppy then reads as better musicality, to a certain extent, because the music is flowing. And so with your body, you want to match the flow of the music and not have your movement look disconnected from the music.
Yeah. One of the things that I am hoping to remember to play with this summer, because I teach variations in the summer, I usually teach variations in 8 counts. But that leads to like those just brief pauses of what comes next.
Yeah.
Which reads as choppiness, right? So they've got like 8 fluid counts, small break, 8 fluid counts. And so one of the approaches, it's going to take so much work on my part. That's okay. I kind of like challenges. One of the things I want to try this summer is teaching variations, doing them with the music instead of using the vocabulary. I just want to see what happens.
Yeah.
I'm curious.
Yeah. Is there like a different way to teach it that just lends itself to more musicality?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm really curious. So that's what I'm going to do. I think phrasing was the 9th one.
It was.
We got through them.
It's funny how it's like a microcosm of the larger conversation about artistry, because it's like there's 9 elements of artistry. Musicality is one of them. And within musicality, there's 9 elements. But I love it for the same reason that I love the elements themselves, because I think the more you can actually break down and put concrete concepts and ideas to something, the higher the likelihood that you can actually make progress and work on it and do something with it. One of the things I would love to even just talk about, which this probably should have been the first question I asked, but whatever, we're making it work. But one of the things that I have heard and seen even online is just this idea that musicality is something you either are born with or you're not. What is your opinion on that? Like, do you think that musicality is something that is innate, something that can be taught? Love to hear your thoughts.
I think it's both.
Yeah.
I go full cactus mode when I hear the phrase born with or not, because I'm like, are you sure? Did you try teaching it?
Yeah. No, I think it's a good reaction, though, for most things in ballet, because I think ballet in particular has a lot of those where it's like, you're just born with it. And I'm like, that is so not helpful to like 98% of the population. So I agree. And I also bristle a little bit at anything where it's like, you either are born with it or you don't. Because I'm like, that feels lazy to me.
It's a red flag for lazy teaching. I was talking to someone yesterday and I heard myself say the words, the problem is never the body of the student. The problem is the skill of the teacher.
Yeah.
Which is going to come back to bite me one of these days, because I'll be like, oh, look, I need more skill. That's okay. I will learn. Okay, so born with it or not in regards to musicality. If you have what is considered a typical hearing ability, We're just going to talk about that. Like, you can absolutely be hard of hearing and still participate in dance classes and still be very beautiful. But musicality requires some really specific personalizations. And I just don't think we have time to get into that, but I do want to mention that it's not an automatic disqualifier.
Yeah.
But talking about people with a normal range of hearing, there's a lot of things that can go into it. I just found some research done by a scientist who found that if we link moving to music, like movement and rhythm, if we link it in the very young ages, like I want to say before 3, I could be wrong, it helps connect neurons in their brains in ways that honestly, music education later in life, even if it's as early as 7, doesn't.
Mm.
And so, for example, some cultures have a stereotype of being more musical. It could be genetic. I don't know. But coming from Protestant white lady land, where like we sit still and listen to music, we are not known for our musicality. And then I'm driving down my street and my neighbors are having a party and everybody is out dancing on the lawn because dance is not reserved for people who are good at it. And yes, my neighbors are from a culture that is known to be more musical.
Yeah.
Is it genetic? Is it because they just played with music sooner? I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think that definitely, definitely comes into it. And then on top of that, there are different ways to be musical. And I don't have research for this. All I have is my own anecdotal experience, but I also have been teaching for, I think it's 28 years. So that's a lot. I got a lot of anecdotes at this
Yeah.
point.
Valid.
I find that in my experience, students fall into 2 camps, and it's not evenly, but there are the people that assign or attach or automatically feel or know some kind of emotion or narrative. And then there are people who automatically and instantly connect with the structure of the music. It's almost like feelings and math people. And about 70% of my students are feeling people, and about 30% are math people.
Mm-hmm.
And my lived experience has been the teachers who talk the most about musicality, use your music, be more musical, fill the music, all of those things. Those are teachers who, A, musicality came very naturally to them for several reasons, I'm sure. And B, almost always, they have all been emotional connectors to music.
Mm.
And so when I talk to adult dancers about musicality and they say, "Oh, I'm not very musical," if you give them space to keep talking a little bit, they will tell you that they are not musical because I only focus on the meter, or because I get distracted noticing the syncopation, which is advanced rhythm. Or they'll say things like, I just get lost noticing how we could count it in 4 sets of 3 or 3 sets of 4. And I'm like, okay, that is musical. That is
Yeah.
deeply musical, but it's mathematically musical. They're both really valid. And we just don't do a great job. It's so funny because if you watch like a performance of a Balanchine piece and someone, for example, a critic will talk about the musicality of the dancer, they will talk about the emotional side. But if, for example, Concerto Barocco is really mathematical.
Yeah.
A lot of Balanchine's work is actually really, really mathematical. And so many, many, many people have decided that the emotional connection is superior. But when we look at the people that we consider amazing choreographic artists, they tend to balance them and value them fairly evenly.
Yeah.
So even the idea of like you're born with it or you're not, you're probably born with a preference for emotion versus math.
So, one of the things that I think a lot of adult dancers feel just on this topic of musicality is that they can hear the music like in more of a logical way, but they struggle with that translation. So, why do you think that gap tends to exist between like I can hear it, but I can't get it in my body, and like how can we start to close that gap?
I think there are a few things that can contribute to that. The first one is just the technical difficulty of ballet. It just is hard. It just is weird. If we were meant to work in turnout, our pelvises would look different, you know? They really would.
Yeah.
So some of it is just the technical difficulty. And then we add the language barrier on top of that. Even if you speak fluent French, we're not speaking French in class. It's this weird franglais situation going on. So there's just a lot of new and difficult things to be learning. And the more practice you have, the more those neural pathways get myelinated, the easier it becomes. And then you have brain space to think about musicality.
Yeah.
It's okay if you are not thinking about it today or
Yeah.
next week or next month. It doesn't mean that you're A, not musical. You probably are more musical than you think. And B, it doesn't mean that you are not going to become more musical.
Yes.
You just have a lot. You're just working on a lot right now, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And then I think another one of the really big things that holds up adult dancers, and a few of the younger ones too, but a lot of adults, is perfectionism.
Mm-hmm.
Because by the time you're an adult, you've already made a mistake in a classroom in some subject, and you've already been made to feel stupid about it.
Yeah.
And as an intelligent human being, you don't want to do that again. And so because musicality is showing something deeply personal about yourself, and because it can be interpreted so many different ways. Like, you know, if your teacher or another student is going to be like, oh, you're using your turnout well, that one's pretty binary. You are or you aren't. Musicality, you don't know if someone else is going to appreciate what you're offering. It's deeply vulnerable.
Yeah.
It's okay if it takes you some time to be ready to try that. It's okay. It really, really is. This comes back to what we've talked before about how adult ballet class is going to be one of the cradles that changes the world.
Yeah.
Because it's full of people who are kind and brave and welcoming. And even though you know you're in that space, we all still have how many years of experience and how many walls put up. And it's not like you can just decide that the wall is gone. You have to kind of dismantle it.
Yeah.
So it just takes a little bit of time.
I love too what you said about not placing the expectation on yourself of having to work on musicality at the beginning of your journey, because I feel like with adult ballet in particular, this is something that is really difficult and not talked about enough, is what are the reasonable expectations to put on yourself as you're moving through levels as a dancer? Because I think if you start as a child, especially if you're in something like an RAD program where things are systematized and there's a structure, you kind of know what you're expected to be working on according to the level that you're in. And like, these are the things that we're working on mastering this year or this semester. But when you're an adult dancer who's just taking classes, I think what we tend to do as adults is just feel like, oh my God, I need to be good at everything like
Yeah.
as soon as possible. And I think one of the best gifts you can give yourself as a dancer is reasonable expectations, because I think that's what prevents overwhelm, and then overwhelm becomes burnout, and then you might just be like, I'm done with ballet, I don't want to do this anymore. So I think like having reasonable expectations and reasonable benchmarks is so valuable. So thank you for pointing that out, because I think that as much as it's helpful for adult dancers to hear, here are the things that you should be working on, or here's tips for things to do, and like we all want that, I also think sometimes it's just as important, maybe even more, to hear, hey, it's okay for you to like let this one fall by the wayside for a minute while you're just acclimating to the fact that ballet is a lot and you're trying to think about 25 million things and it's all in French and you're in a classroom with other people around you, and like thinking about and being overly concerned with musicality is maybe not the best use of energy or like a reasonable expectation to put on yourself as a beginner dancer, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that that's like a really good, really important call out.
Well, thank you. And I'm going to build on that. If you decide you do want to work on musicality, there's a good chance something else is going to slip a little bit. And it's probably going to be your core alignment, just speaking from experience. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's gonna be a problem if you focus on musicality and allow the alignment to be less than the best you can do for several classes in a row.
Yeah.
But if you're like, I just want to only care about the music today, let the rest of it go, you will get more corrections on your alignment, and just water off a duck's back because you're doing something else for you that day, and that's okay too.
Yep.
I don't think there's a day where you can get everything right, and I
So true.
probably should put that in my teaching notebook too. I don't follow my own advice.
But I think like in agreement with that totally. I think musicality is a great one to work on at home, not in the classroom setting. Not to say that you can't work on it in the classroom setting, but I think because of the exact reasons you just said, like I know for me, a lot of times when I'm really working on musicality, there's little technique things that will slip because I feel like ballet is like Jenga, where you're
Yes.
like one piece is getting pushed out, the other piece you're just like trying to balance the tower while you're pulling and pushing different blocks. And so for me, like it's so much easier to work on musicality at home where I'm not going to be worried about, oh, now because I'm focusing on that, I'm for sure going to get a correction about my turnout or about, losing my alignment. And I also think too for adults where I mean, I guess this is maybe true of kids too, but I know for adults there can be like a high degree of self-consciousness around letting go a little bit more and making movement maybe a little bit bigger or a little more expressive. And so that's another reason that I personally find it easier to push myself a little bit deeper into musicality at home because there's less self-consciousness of being in a room with other people. So
Yeah.
I don't know if
Yeah.
that makes sense. But
It does make sense. And it's really, I would say probably almost exclusively, yes, something that all adults feel.
so how can people stay connected with you, follow your work, et cetera, et cetera?
The best way to find me is on my website, geekyballerina.com. I have a blog. I have a newsletter you can sign up for. I am mildly active on social media, just mildly. But again, it's Geeky Ballerina. And then my book is on Amazon.
And we will be back soon with
Yes.
the next element, which I don't even think we've talked yet about which one we're going to do next.
I
So
have not planned it out.
everyone else will get to be just as surprised as we are because we don't even know what we're talking about. So it'll be a surprise for all of us what the next element is. But
Well, we can tell you the 4 that it's not going to be.
Yeah.
But we have 5 options still.
yeah, and that's actually a good reminder. If you have not listened to the other 3 episodes yet, I will actually link all of those episodes in the show notes as well. So there's easy access if you want to go back and catch up on any elements that you missed, because this has been a really fun series that we're going to continue on through the rest of the year. So
It's going to be great.
thank you so much for being here, Chelsea.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to share it with a friend or leave a quick review. It really helps more adult dancers find the podcast. All the links and resources we mentioned today are waiting for you in the show notes. And if you want more adult ballet content in between episodes, come hang out with me on Instagram @thebusybunhead. See you next week after class.